If you haven't gotten yourself a copy, Made in America is hot off the press. We are going to take a deeper dive into the report, break it down, and discuss some of the trends that will shape our economy. A conversation well worth your 10 minutes right here on UBS Trending. Hi everyone, and welcome to UBS Trending. I'm your guest host, Sandrea Brooks, filling in for Anthony. Michelle LaLiberty is back in the studio to break down the latest trending report, Made in America. Michelle, welcome. So, reading through Made in America, there are some huge spending trends. Before we take a deeper dive, if you can consolidate this report in one word, what would that be?
Independence.
Independence, that is strong. All right, we're starting off strong. Why?
Well, there's three spending plans at play here, right? CHIPS, IRA, bipartisan infrastructure law. So that covers a lot of ground, but they share a common thread, and that's that they seek to protect critical U.S. infrastructure and secure our independence by reducing our reliance on other nations for the materials and for the inputs that power our economy, right? So to be independent, we need roads and bridges that we can drive on, right? We need roads and bridges that can safely transport materials. Yes. All of these things are very important in order for us to be independent.
Absolutely, and just given everything that has been going on in the world, I think it's timely that we have these three spending plans. So I know it's a little bit early, but what are some of the impacts that you're seeing from these spending plans so far?
Yeah, it's a great point. It is a little bit early, especially for some of the plans that were more recent, like IRA. But the bipartisan infrastructure law, that was actually the first of the three, we are seeing that show up in some of the U.S. manufacturing construction numbers. So U.S. manufacturing construction was up about 35% in 2022, and it hit a multi-decade high as a percent of GDP. So we are starting to see this show up, and we're seeing companies announce, plenty of billion-dollar plus plans to invest in the United States.
Absolutely. And again, we're still in the early stages, and we know that we have a long road ahead, right? Because reshoring in general is complex. But focusing on specific areas of reshoring and these spending plans, what are some areas that are crucial for national security?
Yeah, first you're right. Reshoring is really hard to do. I think labor is, a huge challenge, especially here in the U.S. But because of that national security component that you mentioned, I think there are some areas that we will, continue to focus on, despite, some of the challenges here. And I think that's, again, critical infrastructure. So things like water, transport, energy security, and the transition. We saw last year just how quickly, fragile supply chains can impact energy prices, right? And then also technological leadership. So think things like semiconductors, even cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. The U.S. is going to want to be a leader here.
Absolutely, absolutely. And while we're on the matter of, national security, I want to talk a little bit more about why those are so important. And if you could, maybe pull a few, power stats from the report to kind of just back up, why we should really be focused on this.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's a couple, areas I can hit here. So I'll try and touch on infrastructure, semis, and minerals. So for infrastructure, if you think about, again, I mentioned bridges, 7.5% have been labeled structurally deficient.
7.5%?
7.5%, that's correct.
Wow.
But we've continued to drive on these bridges. So there are things that are due for upgrade, let's put it that way. I mentioned semis. So if you think about semiconductor foundry services, about 70% plus of the revenue is generated by one company that is located in Taiwan. So that helps show, again, just how reliant we are, on other nations. And then finally, minerals. There's a number of critical minerals that the U.S. has deemed as critical with fragile supply chains. 12 of them specifically, we are 100% import reliant. Again, those are minerals that are critical for our economy, right? So just helps to highlight how fragile supply chains can be and how interconnected we really are.
So when I was reading this report and I read about the critical minerals or the crucial minerals and how reliant we are on them, I was a little bit taken aback. And you've spent so much time on this report. I kind of want to get a little bit about, what were your initial thoughts after reading this?
Yeah, I mean, it is a little bit surprising, right? Or it's a little bit of a wake up, and you think, wow, we can't go it alone. I mentioned that we're seeking independence, right? But we can't go it alone on everything. And when you think about minerals, there's a geographic component, right?
Yeah.
There are some that we just can't mine here, even if we wanted to. So the one thing that I tend to think about there is, recycling, because that is something that we can do here.
Yes.
And that has been, part of some of these announcements that we've seen have been announcements in recycling facilities.
Absolutely. Okay. So then, turn into the investing side of things. What should investors be on the lookout for?
Yeah, and I'll try to be quick here. I would say kind of three things. One, municipal bonds can be a way to get exposure to these trends. But then there's also kind of thematic equities. We've identified a number of companies that should be able to benefit from these plans. And third, from a longer term perspective, I mentioned the challenge of labor. I think automation is a huge takeaway here, as well as energy efficiency. I think if you're building a new production facility in the US, one, you're going to look to automate, again, because labor is expensive and hard to come by.
Yes.
But then also you're going to look for it to be energy efficient because that impacts your bottom line. It's a huge part of operating cost.
Yeah.
So I think those are two pretty significant takeaways as well.
So Michelle, we only have a few seconds left, but what is your biggest takeaway from all of this?
Sure, I would say outside of independence, maybe patience, because this is going to be, a multi-year story. So I would just remind investors that, this isn't going to happen overnight, but it is a trend that looks like it should be here for the next few years.
Patience and independence. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Michelle. And to our viewers, for more information, visit ubs.com/views. Make sure to follow UBS on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and check out our Instagram channel at UBS Trending for UBS Studio content that you can find anywhere else. And as always, if you have any questions about your portfolio, please speak with a financial advisor. Until next time, I'm Sandra Brooks, filling in for Anthony. Have a great rest of the day, and remember to keep your eyes on what's trending.